My God, I think Vice President Chiwenga has a real poison chalice. You have a national team of looters. My timeline has been so lit by the idea that there might be a political coup taking place in Zimbabwe. Listen to you. There is no political coup taking place in Zimbabwe. Coups don't work that way. But let me begin with a scene from history that might give you some context. In Paris in 1793, the European world overtime during the French Revolution's most savage chapter. There was a pattern that kept repeating itself with mathematical precision. Every new regime that seized power in France promised to end the feast of those who were corrupt, but all they really achieved is they were simply changing sitting arrangement on the thieves who were on the table. So the Giordans came and they replaced the royalists. Then the Jacobins came and they replaced the Giordans. Then the Directory replaced the Giordans. And each time that there was a change in dispensation, the story was rule and corruption. But all that happened is there was new thieves with bigger. Zimbabwe is now trapped in that identical cycle. The problem Vice President Chiwenga is having is a problem that he created for himself, which is seeing on your timeline the shameless, breathtaking display of state looted walls is not just another scandal. This is a broadcast. It is a signal. I don't know how familiar you are with political science, but there's a scientist called Carl Schmitt who say this is the drawing of a line in politics. What you have is the national looters executing a vulgar national feast where you're either at the table with them or you're the one on the menu. The one deliverable, the one thing Vice President Chiwenga is not given a pass or allowed to fail is the promise he made, which is he was going to remove the criminals around the president. Because what you're now seeing is not just theft. This is the absolute nightmare scenario for somebody who says, I am going to remove corruption. Because you're not going to liberate the nation without addressing promises you made. We unfortunately have a treasury that is now the a la carte or buffet of looting. If you really want to know the true cost, measured in stolen, you have to measure it in stolen capacities. The true cost of corruption is the development that you're not getting for your children, the hospitals you're not getting for your mother, with every important supercar. You are robbing a whole province from having a functional clinic. So the looters are not just stealing money in Zimbabwe, they're actually stealing the future, the potential, the very freedom and development that the people need. But the catalyst for the current political firestorm is Vice President Chiwenga. Now we have an explosive dossier detailing Kudakwashe Tabwire's systematic looting of $3.2 billion of ZANU-PF's Secunda holding state. Listen, Kudakwashe Tabwire is the best deal maker I have ever come across, and I've come across some impressive people. The man is actually a really good deal maker. But I guess if you're looking for someone to attack, you're looking for somebody to attack. The names of the corruption file now represent what is unprecedented in Zimbabwe. A real first team, a real national team with panache of looters and thieves. In another episode, I'm going to give you a list of judiciary and high court judges that have all received so much money, so many cars from members of the national looting team that I don't think you can expect the judiciary to deliver. What Zimbabwe has now assembled is a world-class team of economic terrorists, absolute Olympic level. We have built the most spectacular team of people whose only exercise and only sport they know is hand to mouth. Literally, like hand to mouth, hand to mouth. That's sport. The Dossier also mentions Wicknell X-Files, the flashy striker of the team, buys Mercedes-Benzes for every musician. While hospitals are collapsing, the Dossier says your specialty is converting public tenders into personal fleets. It's a national shame, but there is likely not a single private citizen in the world who has more Rolls Royces than Sir Wicknell. I don't like Wicknell as much as his biggest fans like him. I don't dislike him as much as his biggest critics It's like, and I actually understand them. But the dossier from the vice president also has the presidential advisor reporting. According to the vice president, we now have systematic looting and hand to mouth. I just don't think that these people are businessmen. I think these are just record holding extractors whose paying regime really just only consists of repetitive hand to mouth. Before every single deal, before every corruption killing shot, for one to phone, hand them up. They're preparing to consume what should be your children's education, your mother's medication, your family's future. But here's what I think is terrifying about the dossier. What I found very terrifying. If you really wanted to do a real financial forensic, it would leave these guys no chance of survival. It's not really that difficult to trace or track the money. Let me explain what a financial intelligence investigation would actually look like. They don't just search for a single smoking gun. The map pattern. In America, you have Epstein files. In Zimbabwe, you have the National Looting File, a library of leaked call and voice notes that serve as self-narrated confessions of state capture by the captain of the team. And here's the fatal flaw with my big brother Wicknell. And I think Wicknell knows everybody's sides. He knows who to give 4,000 and he knows who to give 4 million. And the trouble with that is not only does the left hand know what the right hand is doing, there isn't a person who is in a high office who he is not telling who else has accepted the money or who else accepted the call. And like I said, I'll give it the forensic on the judiciary judges who are part of this. I just think if you really wanted to do a forensic investigation, you would be able to find that there's a government department which is sending money to a shelf company which is sending money to a card dealership company. Every payment a card dealer gets in cash is money that was taken out of a bank in cash with a narrative. And if you look hard enough into the narrative, you start seeing patterns. You will be able to catch the looting team with their pants down and their willies in their hands. But let me give you statistics that I think really triggered me in the dossier. Zimbabwe now leads the world in Rolls Royces per capita among sub-Saharan nations. We cannot feed our population, but we supply the national looting from the most expensive vehicles on earth. One Rolls Royce will cost just $450,000 US. That single vehicle is equal to a budget of rural clinics. Geez, I mean, for $450,000, you can equip 15 clinics. You can pay 800 salaries. The calculation in the dossier that I do find as an ignition of rage, that Zimbabwe generates approximately $4 billion US annually from mining. We spend approximately $2 billion of that money on foreign vehicle imports. That's 51% of the money we make goes right out of the country to buy cars. Our whole productive exercise as a country is so that we buy cars. It's not very difficult to see mbava. It's not very difficult kuona sura mari yakapiwa. Apanise kuona mari yabiwa baba inooneka pamunhu tema nekuti pamunhu tema inotanga nekutenga mota nozviita mari yabiwa pamunhu tema. Trouble with the general dossier is you're not talking about people who are just stealing money. Okay? You're talking about people who are physically now consuming Zimbabwe. Ukatotarisa pamwe flag, pamwe scarfing akapekwa na president. You're so mtu unogona Zimbabwean benefit yapote papa sasina. Ichi kashiri kake kipa flag. Kakatozhikiwa kapera kugara Zimbabwe ango makala flag babu kuzwa kutopinda futi makala to unama wacho makala. Pamwe atoshota makala pa flag babe boy. Hakuzvitenderedza pa kugara padivi nemusoka. Zvichipa sokuti mukuru asitoona kuti flag iri pascarf iri pahuro shiri apa sisina panakamboona ushiri unonzi hungwe Zimbabwe. If you ever seen hungwe uone ichikauka mumhepo vanhu vakatorova shiri baba. One particular member in the dossier, of course you know who, has now redefined his own human form. I mean, he's eaten so much of national resources that you can makuriro arikuita mafukiro arikuita vanhu vari nokuti ukaenda kutoireti chekucho kwavo uchatoona kana madhiri akautonomuona. In fact, nyange mabhebhe acho zvavo ari kurohwa chinjapisi havasitogona kutoona kuti ango down. Anyway, let me get back to it. General Chiwenga released in his dossier an argument that every kilogram that Ivan represents a stolen contract. Every barrel, with a 6-pack barrel, so you think about the mama 6-pack and sipa. Clinics are not being built because Wagama 6-pack and sipa. But General's Chiwenga strategy is also not doing. We've seen this dossier play before. On July 19, 2017, Professor Jonathan Moore delivered what history will record as the most prophetic political representation in Zimbabwe's modern era. There was a 72-minute video dossier to the ZANU-PF Politburo. It was called the Blue Ocean Strategy. And in the dossier, it was exposing, it claimed Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa at the time. And it was outlining what he believes was the blueprint for systematic state capture. He documented how institutions like the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption were now weaponized to only fight political rivals. So, if you fast forward to today, the same methods are now in play. We have dossiers with targeted accusations, with institutional welfare, but the protagonists are what has changed. The very tools of capture are now being turned against their architects. The Blue Ocean Strategy never really ended. It just simply, what you did is just simply change from one president's version of the Blue Strategy to another. And that's why I arrived at this thing I'm calling the Poison Chalice. This is why I am saying this one issue, this Poison Chalice, could destroy Vice President Chiwenga. He came to power on one front. Vice President Chiwenga was supposed to only be known for one thing and one thing only, removing the criminals around the president. That was the entire compact of November 2017. And that is why the world allowed the military intervention, because of that strategic condition. Robert Mugabe had been surrounded by thieves, absolute most shameless face. So the world accepted Vice President Chiwenga because they believed there was going to be removal of criminals around state capture. Now, Vice President Chiwenga is now positioned himself as the nicest, trying to deliver that, and the man who can try to claim that, but he's dealing with a governance of parasites. The fatal problem at hand is Vice President Chiwenga is now a contradiction that is working. Because he either doesn't know who the criminals are or he can't deal with the criminals are. Both are very problematic. If he doesn't know who they are, he's demonstrably unfit to lead. If he doesn't know who they are but he cannot act, then he is impotent, equally unfit to lead. So there is no real easy way out, Vice President. The brutal truth is that, he must have spoken in clarity, the criminals around President Mugabe did not disappear in 2017. They did not retire. They did not repent. They actually are richer now without President Mugabe than they were with President Mugabe. You have people who are making more money from ZANU-PF than members of ZANU-PF. It is crazy to me. The poorest people in Zimbabwe are members of ZANU-PF. You got a billion is now so dwarfed that I don't think anybody under Mugabe could eat this much. That the vice president has put forward was dismantled by Kapupi, Temba Maliswan, and he says the allegations in that stem from personal vendettas over his wedding payment. He says 6 Rolls Royces were promised to him, but they were not delivered. $150,000 were promised to him from wedding arrangement. This is Zimbabwe's single greatest tragedy. There is one possibility, even though it is very slim, the Poison Chalice. Under President Robert, the previous Central Intelligence Organization, President's Intelligence, the state security apparatus, became a ground for useless gossip. They could have saved Mugabe, but they would have also saved themselves, and they failed spectacularly. There is a new director of CIO, Felton Mangwana. I've met the man, I know him a little bit. Director Mangwana, if he ever gets to hear this, you have inherited an institution that failed its mandate in the most critical moment in the previous dispensation. You allowed the intelligence service to become a gossip mill while the nation was being systematically looted, but nothing like what we're seeing now. While the very criminals of the 2017 intervention promised that they'll be removed, you know as well as anybody that they're now stronger. But the one person who I think actually has the toolkit and capability, loyalty, and patriotic type of heart, I think it is thought number one. Thought number one could become the deal maker or the deal breaker. Now, the question is actually very simple. Will he? Or will he become another footnote in the long chronicle of Zimbabwean institutional fate? Another promising appointment that resulted in nothing but intelligence reports that gathered while criminals grew fat. You have a better chance that you than with G. The pattern that is terrifying is that, that is terrifying but empowering, is that the criminals around the president are not just an inconvenience. They are historically the reason why presidents fail. Criminals around the president were the reason why Mugabe fell. G40, good at these, became so shameless, so publicly grotesque in their looting that the military had moral justification to intervene. Their corruption became the commission structure for regime change. If you look at South Africa, Jacob Zuma, the story of the Guptas, it is the criminals around the president who become the reason for currency where presidents start to face existential crises if they don't deal with them. TF ZANU-PF member will support the national looting team, will celebrate when they distribute t-shirts and pocket change. You really, every son of his men, the time point is to stop and look at what are you doing? You are applauding the people who are eating your children's food. Like, it's so wild to me. You go home with a t-shirt, you go home like a chicken bonzo. They go home with the budget for your kids to be able to access good schools. So you are the audience of your own robbery, sharing a piece. But let me paint the picture with absolute clarity. Imagine you're sitting at home, okay? You're sitting at home and then a thief breaks into your house and steals your food. And then this is where it becomes pathological for me. You bring a dish of water so that the thief can wash their hands before they eat the food they stole from your house. You hold the towel so that they can wipe their mouth as you watch them eat. You smile, and then when they go and you're now with your children, you're very excited. Say, did you see just how much the thief ate? Like, find me another country where this happens. Find me another place on earth where the victims of theft serve as waiters at their own robbery, where the person who's being robbed brings in water. Zimbabwe is the only country I know, the only nation on earth with such psychological trauma that we've normalized it. This is not politics. This is not even, Dossier for me doesn't even talk about corruption. The Dossier for me just exemplifies the collaborative pathology. In the Dossier, we offer special mention president's advisors, like Delishu, I really like it, and I know him very well. What Vice President Chiwenga was trying to do with the Dossier, I think the real intent, I don't think it was to try and get justice, but I think the real intent was try and make association with the national first team of looters become radioactive. The Dossier was supposed to make it look that anybody who is photographed was going to become the new marked person. Anyone who is seen supporting on social media or publicly associating themselves with the looters, anybody who's seen as enabling the operations was going to be given a position that you've declared that you support them. The Dossier 16 sell a narrative that these looters are not businessmen, these looters are not entrepreneurs, these looters are not even well connected. They are just the reason why children are dying in hospitals while they're waiting for medicine. The Dossier was trying to sell that the reason qualified teachers are fleeing the country is because of the looting boys. That they're the reason an entire generation has lost faith in Zimbabwe, or faith that Zimbabwe can ever function as a normal country. The Rolls Royces are not a status symbol anymore. To me, like, they're crime scenes of will. Can you imagine? The mansions are no longer achievements. To me, they're monuments of theft, physical evidence, state capture, architectural representation of national failure. The Dossier, it might not stick. Ultimately, it's not about loyalty. Ultimately, I don't think it's about gaining political support. I think it's with a moral bankruptcy that Zimbabweans are now very good at watching. We are cataloging. We're remembering who stood where when the nation was. President Mnangagwa, my analysis will always position the president with the respect that that office demands. My father always used to say to me, you don't salute the man, you salute the office. I think President Mnangagwa is a remarkable biography that he has earned. I think he has led the country's national security apparatus with distinction. I think he survived assassination attempts that would have broken listening, President Emerson Mnangagwa actually understands strategy at the very highest level. But yeah, with the same respect and same understanding of strategy, I must also say this, that the criminals around the president are doing to President Emerson Mnangagwa exactly what the criminals around President Robert Mugabe did to President Robert Mugabe. They are making the president synonymous with looting. They are ensuring that when historians write about Mnangagwa's era, it will be defined not by Zimbabwe spoken for business, but by Zimbabwe was open season for thieves. The president's legacy built over decades of service. The mathematics of this is very unforgiving and absolute. Look, if it's true about the $3.2 billion theft by Queen Bee, then Zimbabwe's entire combined GDP education budget is one. The national looting squad is not just stealing money. They're stealing Zimbabwe's capacity to exist as a functional state. They're dismantling the future, piece by piece, contract by contract, Rolls Royce by Rolls Royce. And now we arrive at the final calculation that determines everything. Okay? So this is the real point. Vice President Chiwenga, his whole entire political legitimacy, his entire claim to succession, his entire justification of the events of November 2017 rests on one promise, which is to remove the criminals around the president. If Vice President Chiwenga cannot fulfill that promise, then he has absolutely no claim to succession. The dossier really means nothing. The vice president's military credentials mean nothing. Proximity to power means nothing. It's funny because they say you become what you claimed to oppose, right? The military intervention of 2017 was allowed by the region, by the international community on one condition: clean up the presidency, remove the criminals. That is the real job, VP. The world aimed Zimbabwe passing constitutional democracy because we promised the alternative was what? That this criminal circle was so distractive that military intervention was the lesser evil. I like the vice president, but this is his poison chalice. You drink from it every single day. You cannot put it down. You cannot ignore it. Either be your crowning achievement, the issue that radicalizes the nation behind you, or it will be the dagger that destroys all of your ambition, Vice President. You don't have a middle ground. There is no way to finesse this. You either deal with the criminals around the president, or you become associated. There are only two options history will record. The nation is exhausted. Zimbabwe genuinely exhausted. And they're kind of really tired of looking at people who are eating and saying, what ain't who's going to do? The only real question that remains to me is, are we going to see the looters go through institutional reform, or finally the president going to finally deal with the criminals that are destroying his legacy? Or are we going to see the vice president finally fulfilling the promise that justified the military intervention? Or are we going to see the intelligence chief, Fulton Mangwana, providing accurate information rather than gossip, doing the patriotic job of that unit, which is to protect the function and the seat of the president? If it does come through chaos, through the coup, I don't think it will. But if Zimbabwe does descend into another French Revolution cycle of replacing themselves, it will be because we failed to learn the lessons from history. The lessons that history teaches, brutal mathematic precision. The criminals around the president always determine how the president ends. The criminals around the president will determine. They ended Mugabe's presidency. I will hope they don't end this one. Director Mangwana, if he provides accurate intelligence and it is received well, Vice President Chiwenga, if he fulfills the promise that justified President Mnangagwa coming in, if he saves his legacy by removing the criminals that he said he was going to, because he probably is one of two people who can. Or Zimbabwe will just keep watching. The Zimbabwe show. We just keep watching, and pattern will go into play. Pattern will play out again. The new thieves will replace the old thieves, while the nation's dogs, the national team of looters, will keep on practicing the only exercise that they know how to practice, hand to mouth, all about the alakat, the national looters are now on the field. As you listen to my voice, as you hear me right now, I want you to know the game is already started. What about the Tambo? Maluta akuluta. I don't know whether reality will eventually wake us up to one day, but yeah, I do get the frustration and the national suffering, and I don't think this is bad luck. I don't think this is poor governance. I think this is theft. It's systematic extraction of a nation's future by criminals who believe that they're untouchable. And I think they're wrong. And the poison chalice is what's in the way of Vice President Chiwenga. As for now, President Emerson Mnangagwa holds all of the cards. But until next time, head down.